Hello everyone. So my name is István Zártai. I work as a researcher in philosophy. I'm currently a visiting researcher at Keio University in Tokyo, Japan, and I'm also teaching at the Tokyo Institute of Technology and at Sophia University. And today I'm going to talk a bit about the ethics of AI, which is a very exciting new topic within philosophy, and it's an interdisciplinary field which overlaps, as you can guess, with all kinds of policy making, politics, international relations, and technological fields, a bit with engineering and some other areas, as we will see in this lecture and the next. Today we are going to focus on a little bit of an introduction to this topic, and then on how it relates to privacy and work. So let's get cracking. Applied ethics is basically a subfield of ethics in philosophy. And it's important to mention it at the beginning because talking about AI in the way that we're going to talk about it today is going to be a study in applied ethics. What applied ethics does, it looks at what actions and practices are permissible in a certain practical field. So applied ethics deals with things like professional ethics, it deals with things like medical ethics, engineering ethics, business ethics, and AI is a subfield of applied ethics, the ethics of AI. As you can see, I listed some of the questions which have been the big questions, the famous questions that people have been broadly discussing. If you look at any of the big newspapers, they have run articles on these in the last 20, 30, 40 years. Is abortion morally permissible? Is there a moral obligation to vote in democracies? Do people living in wealthy countries have any obligations to people living in poor countries, especially desperately global poor countries? So yeah, this is the kind of approach within which the ethics of AI is located. Now, the other notion I want to mention at the beginning is that of policies. What is a policy? So policies are sets of ideas or plans on how to act, what to do in particular situations, and these plans for acting have been agreed on usually by organizations like government, companies, NGOs, or political parties, local groups of people. So policies have a lot of different forms. They can be laws, they can be regulations, they can be recommendations, they can be action plans, and they can work with many kinds of tools. They can incentivize people to act according to the policies with the help of taxing certain activities in certain amounts, like maybe you give a tax break and you're trying to encourage people to go in that direction by that, do that kind of activity. Maybe you raise taxes, so you try to discourage people, or you say, okay, you can do that, but then you have to give back more to society in order to offset the harm that you're doing or the risk that people have to take because of you. Anyway, one of the best way to deal with issues in the ethics of AI is through policy making. Why is that so? It is because many of the large companies and the large government programs which are pushing the development of AI, like the DARPA projects in the US or the work of Google, IBM, and other similar companies, are so fast and they are in such a swing that it's very hard to regulate them. If we might say, and we might have very good evidence that some of these programs, of course not all of them, but some of them are very risky or morally wrong. but that won't stop, realistically, these projects. So what we have to do is to try and control the fallout of such projects and activities. That's what policymaking can do, or disincentivize the organizations developing certain kinds of programs for continuing to go into that direction. So this is a fairly practical way of thinking about how to deal with these issues. And a little bit about the ethics of AI. What kind of questions does the ethics of AI deal with? Well, it deals with mainly, it's always, the list is always changing. But currently people usually list privacy and surveillance, manipulation of behavior, the opacity of AI systems, biased databases, new kinds of questions thrown at us because of new kinds of human-robot interactions, questions about the operations of autonomous systems, machine ethics, and the existence of artificial moral agents. At the moment, humans are pretty much the only moral agents, but some people are trying to create new ones. And finally, what has been called singularity. In today's roughly 15-20 minute session, I'm going to talk about a few of these, and we're going to cover the rest in the next session. Today, the main focus is going to be on work and on privacy. And next time, the main focus is going to be on autonomy and war. So AI in this context is broadly any kind of artificial computational system that shows intelligent behavior. This definition comes from a researcher who is affiliated at the moment with Oxford University, and this is Vincent C. Miller. You can see his photo in the upper right corner. Probably my picture might overlap slightly with his. Sorry about this, Vincent. So Professor Miller is a very special person in the field because his work and his positioning has enabled him to stay independent of the large organizations, government organizations and companies which are trying to shape policy in ways that suit them. What does this mean? That he can be pretty unbiased. It's very hard to do that unless you're within a company or some other organization which has a definite stance on these issues. So his work is, I think, in many ways a good guidance for us. There are a couple of other figures, of course, similar people in the field, and I'm going to mention some of them in this session and the next. So the two main issues that I'm interested in and that maybe I'm going to highlight a little bit in this talks is how we could regulate the companies and governments to comply with sensible, ethical ways of using AI or deploying AI or developing AI. And the other is there are certain cases where it's obvious what would be the right thing to do or how we should and shouldn't use AI. But there are a couple of cases, there are a couple of curved balls thrown at us because AI in many ways poses genuinely new challenges. And we need to slow down and decide what's good and bad in those situations, what's virtuous, what's right and wrong. So these are going to be some things I might highlight. I'm showing you the cover of these two books. It's a collection of Greg Egan's stories and of Hannu Rajaniemi short stories. These are both sci-fi authors, and I'm highlighting them here because some of the stories that they have written, people have been thinking, oh, they're very far-fetched, they're extremely futuristic. However, they are not really that far-fetched. Of course, there is technology in their stories which is probably far away, at least 100 years or more. But many of the issues that they discuss in their excellent writing, entertaining, and also having some literary qualities, in their excellent writing are posing and putting very well some of the moral and ethical issues that we're going to face. So, they might be a good way into this literature if you're interested. With that, let's get into privacy and surveillance, which is our first topic for today. So what are the central issues here? Well, the central issues are that in the current way that AI is operating, there's a lot of access to private data, which enables companies and governments and other organizations and agents as well to identify us personally. And we are heading for something, or we are basically already living something that has been called surveillance capitalism. What does this mean? You get a lot of free services online, you get a lot of free things, like think about the videos on YouTube, think about your excellent email service provided by Gmail, think about text messaging on Line, WhatsApp, or other applications. And in exchange, what you give the companies is a lot of data about yourself. And what is the ethical issue with this? Well, the ethical issue with this is that at the moment, too many organizations have access to too much of our private data. Historically, the experience is that this is not good. Information about where we are, who are the people who are close to us, what our perhaps sensitive hobbies are, what our sexual preferences are, what we spend our money on, how we spend our time, how much of it we spend working, and what we spend the rest on. These are very easy to exploit for several purposes: to blackmail people, to publicly humiliate or shame people, to build shaming campaigns against people, to challenge people's credibility, to undermine their public authority, and so on and so on and so on. Well, not to mention cases where people are rounded up and killed because of their ethnicity or religion or whatever. Those are the most extreme cases. But certainly there are also things that you need information for, and a lot of information being concentrated in the hands of very few organizations can enhance the dangers of bad things being done with that kind of information. And you can see this kind of behavior recently with how Google and Apple handled the protests in Hong Kong, or how at the moment, for example, one of the largest scientific publishers, Springer Nature, is handling the Taiwan mainland China issues. So mainland China, the People's Republic of China, claims that Taiwan belongs to it, what Taiwan claims that they are independent, the RCO, the Republic of China. And since Springer Nature's market is so huge in mainland China, in PCR, they have asked some Taiwanese authors to change their affiliation from Taiwan to China, or add PCR to Taiwan. And what happened with Apple in Hong Kong was that they complied in several cases with the police to take down apps from the Apple Store, which protesters used to organize their protests. And Facebook also did the same, and they even enabled, in some cases, at least that's what has been claimed in the media, they have enabled access to lists of who are people participating in certain closed groups to the police or the secret police. Now, what you see here is that these companies are willing to trade the information with governments for market access. And in some cases, when a government is repressive, or it's doing unjust things, or questionable things, at least debatable things, and people protest against it, the government can use its leverage against the companies to gain access to the data. Why can they do that? Because the companies have this data, and there is not strict enough, efficient policy and regulation in place that would forbid them or make it impossible for them to share this data in such cases. Basically, they are making a deal, right? They would lose some market access, they would lose customers, the government, that's what the government threatens them with, and they go into the business and they choose the customers over the privacy of other customers. So, if you think that your data is safe with any kind of organization, or these kind of things used to happen in the past but they don't happen anymore, this is not true. Just because this doesn't happen at the moment in the US or Europe or Japan, it's not because the companies are good or the governments are good, it's because there are no big reasons for people to challenge their governments or these companies. Yeah, if you would challenge the companies, they would also use the information against you. So we have a bunch of really interesting and problematic issues here, and this is a field that we definitely and very quickly need to do something about. This is a quotation from one of the authors who's writing on the ethics of AI, and you can find this entry on the Stanford Encyclopaedia of Philosophy. I won't read it out, we're not here for that, but basically, in short, it says that we need to have rules and we need to have authorities which can actually enforce the rules about how data can be used. At the moment, this is very much a gray area, and companies are exploiting this. They're making a ton of money with your data in the meanwhile, often using it as content. You don't even know, but you're producing data for the companies which they can sell, and you don't see a dollar after it. So this is also problematic. Basically, you're working for free. Right. On to the next problem. The next problem is the manipulation of behavior and advertisement. What is this problem about? What we have here is not something new. Manipulation has always existed. There's always been propaganda, there have always been campaigns, even in the Middle Ages, or if you go back earlier than that, to sway the public's opinion on matters that very important for the leadership, very important for the military, very important for the most powerful businessmen and traders. This is so today as well. What changed? Why are we highlighting this set of issues in the context of AI? Well, what changed is that the methods to influence people and manipulate their behavior have become amplified exponentially. And AI has the capacity to learn about people's behavior and preferences in a way that's very easy to exploit for the purposes of manipulation. Tracking your preferences, messages can be tailored to you, and you will be served those kind of messages that you're most likely to react to. And this is an incredibly powerful tool to help mislead people, or to sway people to endorse opinions, products, politicians, organizations, which they wouldn't otherwise. They wouldn't if they would have unbiased information, or if they wouldn't receive any information. And this way we can basically nudge people very easily towards irresponsible behavior. That is the main problem here. At the moment, all the major powers, the US, China and Russia, and all the middle powers, the bigger European countries, Japan, the Philippines, Mexico, Malaysia, India, a host of other countries, have units which have it as a full-time main job to try and defend their own public discussions against this kind of interference by foreign governments or other entities, companies, groups. And there are also their own operations against other countries, as we saw with the interventions of Russia in the Brexit vote campaign and in the 2016 presidential campaign in the US as well, or in the last elections in France. That, of course, doesn't mean that Russia is the only one doing it. we have enough evidence and people have been willing to talk about this, but if you look around, you find a lot more about this. Now, why is this more problematic than what we had so far? The problem is that there has been in the last 30-40 years since we shifted to a neoliberal capitalist system, an extreme wealth concentration, which led to most media outlets, credible bigger media outlets, which have been established a long time ago and employ professional editors and writers, to be owned by a relatively small number of companies and people. And most of these companies and people are very strongly affiliated with major political parties. So what you get is that it's harder and harder for the majority of people to access news that are not at least colored by the points of view of agents who want people to think in certain ways for their own purposes. This is not necessarily something sinister. Don't think of brainwashing immediately. But it is certainly very often at the level of white propaganda, where, for example, articles take something out of context and discuss it. They do a precise analysis of an isolated subject, but then they don't put it in a bigger picture so that we can easily compare and assess precisely the, for example, riskiness of severity of a problem. This has been a major communication and manipulation strategy recently. And sadly, AI makes this more efficient. AI can do a lot of this kind of learning and information assessment and assembly and dissemination as well. So we need less and less humans, and we can do more and more of this kind of mass manipulation. What we see is that the EU is pretty much the only country which has been proactive. They have been trying to introduce regulation and have been trying to enforce it as well. The US is extremely upset because of this. One of the big pain of American legislators in the last 4 or 5 years is that the EU is trying to tax the big American companies which make a lot of money in the EU. Nobody else does it because everyone else is a bit afraid that then the US retaliates with some kind of economic sanctions. But the EU is big enough to do this, to defend its own interest, and of course many US policymakers, lawmakers, politicians, and business people don't like this. That China and the US don't have mature, serious regulation in these sectors. The government says at the moment, let's see what the companies come up with, let's throw some money at them, and let's see what we can use of that. If it gets dangerous for us, then we will butt in and regulate it, but not until then, probably. Right, so this was our main topic for today, one of the two main topics. I'll very briefly talk about singularity. It is always mentioned in this context. I won't go into much detail because I don't think this is the biggest problem we face, and I don't think this is a problem we face in the short term. The singularity basically means when we achieve the level of sophistication that we are able to create an AI that will be able to create another AI which surpasses any AI in capacities which we humans could create. At that point, AI will be able to, at least that's the presumption, will be able to set goals for the AIs it creates. And it can populate the world with all kinds of intelligent artificial intelligences. Now at that point, in some sense, we lost control over what's going on in the world. Of course, people say you can pull the plug. We can. There's going to be a lot of ways in which you can interfere with what AI is doing. That doesn't mean that AI can't cause a lot of harm. Already most of our banking system and stock trading system is running on AIs. That can be interfered with. A lot of the power grids of the more developed countries are running on AI. That can be interfered with. A lot of public transportation systems are running on AIs. That can be interfered with. And for AI to interfere with these things, it takes probably, at that level where we're at Singularity, less time than for us to stop it from doing so. So some people argue that this is an existential risk to humanity. If we reach this stage, and at that stage we don't have the right safety methods, safety measures in place, then not an evil AI, but a clumsy or a silly AI can wipe us out. Like, imagine an extremely powerful AI which can control vast amounts of resources, for example, food shipments. It can control AI-driven trucks and ships which deliver medication. Now, if these all go to the wrong place, the chaos that is created can really upend societies. So yeah, the risk is huge. How soon this will happen there's a big debate about this. Vox has an excellent introductory overview article. It's of course not serious scholarly research, but it's a good introduction to the topic if you want to learn a bit more and get a step in the door. Right, here is the second big issue that I wanted to mention today. Automation and employment. So I really recommend the video. You can see the link there. And it's a fascinating field. And it's something where the politicians are clearly not acting fast enough, don't have a clue, nor do the economists, what to do. What is the problem here? Most jobs that we are currently doing will be automated. The majority of them not very soon, but maybe 60% of them in the next 40 years or so. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that the job market, as we know it now, where you can study for a profession and expect that profession to still exist in a few years, and then you can go on for at least 1-2 decades and work in that profession and earn a living, that enables you to buy maybe property, maybe you can have your own flat or house, maybe you can have enough money to have a family and support them. That's sort of the idea about the economy now. That's gonna vanish. 6% of the jobs won't be there, and the remaining jobs will also change. A lot of the jobs will sort of be rearranged, taken apart into tasks, because some of those tasks can be done by AI better than by a human, and then the remaining tasks will be lumped together with other tasks which the AI can't perform well to create a job for a human. So people have to be extremely flexible. Now, one of the problems is that most people are not that flexible, most people are not that talented, most people just don't have the energy and time if you take care of your family and friends, which is a normal, basic human need to do and should not be neglected or said that it's not important because the economy is more important. It's not. Humans are social animals and can't be happy without normal social relations. Well, you won't have time for these social relations if you constantly have to relearn your job and learn new skills and learn new activities in order to hold on to a job which is going to be ever changing, because the AI is going to erode the list of skills that humans can still perform better. So, who is this good for? Is this in the interest of society? Well, in some sense, of course, it is. It is in the interest of society in that sense that this process is in itself morally neutral. It's neither good nor bad. Whether or not it's good or bad, development, technology, and invention innovation, these are not good or bad things. Some people try to tell, oh, it's always good. No, in some cases it's not good. Inventing the nuclear bomb was not a good thing. There's nothing good about it. It was a bad thing. So how they play out depends on how they're used, right? Nuclear energy, you could say, played out well. So it's a good thing. Nuclear bombs did not play out well. They're not good things. It's sad that they have been invented and bad, morally bad. The people who invented them and used them were bad people, basically. And the same is true here with job automation. It can be used for fantastic things and in fantastic ways, right? It could basically enable us not to have to do a lot of jobs that at the moment we have to do if we want to have the quality of life that we have. Maybe 90% of people don't enjoy working very much, not in the job and not as much as how much they have to work in order to afford a decent standard of living. Now, if AI can do all the productive work, then we can just enjoy the benefits of that. And the benefits can be shared relatively equally and everyone can benefit. So we can have a huge jump in quality of life for everyone. And of course, that 90% of people who don't enjoy the job they're doing as much of it as they're doing, it doesn't mean that most people don't want to work. If you look at the experiments, for example, where people were given in the recent years, several governments, South Africa, Finland, the UK, are experimenting with the universal basic income scheme, where even if you don't do anything, you get a certain amount of money for fixed every month. Most people keep working. Most people split their time between taking better care of their family. They visit their old relatives, their sick relatives more. Maybe fewer of those people have to go into care homes or die alone in a hospital. And they still do a lot of interesting activity. They still produce interesting videos. They make art. They create, they do gardening. They do sometimes construction work. They create furniture. They still want to do things like forestry. They still want to do, in some cases, things like running a company. Some people still want to do law or accounting or programming or teaching or nursing or working as a doctor. But it's very different if they can do this in 30 hours per week or 25 instead of 40, 50, 60, right? So if we use AI in this way, it has tremendous potential. What is the danger here then? Well, the danger is that most AI is owned by commercial entities, and those commercial entities won't spread the wealth and the gains that they made by firing people and saving labor costs. They will keep that to themselves and only distribute it among the owners of the company and the shareholders. So what this means is that people who are already rich because they own these companies, or are already wealthy because they can afford to buy the shares to invest in these companies, they're angel investors or private investors or whoever they are, these are already people of means who, even if they wouldn't be able to work much, wouldn't do anything, they would have very good lives for the rest of their life. These people will gain most of the benefits as things currently stand that come from this automatization, and the rest of the people won't gain anything and will be there without jobs, so they will be faced with starving. And this is what we're looking at the moment, and there hasn't been a single credible government proposal so far that would deal with this problem, and certainly not proposals that would deal with it in a way that would benefit everyone. And this is extremely worrying and sad. Right, so yeah, this will affect people's life on a very, very large scale. So it's maybe the most urgent and the most threatening problem that AI poses to society. As I explained in the slide, this will lead to even more inequality, and inequality at the level where many people will fall under the standard of living where people are still willing to cooperate with democratic institutions and governments. There are some estimates in political studies that usually societies become much more stable, democratic institutions are much more accepted and become much more robust if the average income of people goes above $6,000 per year. Now you might think, well, it can't go under that, can it? It can. If you can't find a job, if there is no job for you, no job for your spouse, no job for your dad and mom, no job for your son and daughter, it can. People can be wiped out existentially by these developments. When is this going to happen? It's going to happen gradually, probably in the next 40, 50 years, and it's only going to happen if we let it happen in the way that it's happening now. If we regulate it, it won't happen. I wanted to mention you a research done by one of my friends from Oxford, or at least he used to be at Oxford. I think now he's somewhere in the US. He's been working with the Institute for New Economic Thinking, and they have run a study which shows that by 2050 about 30 to 60% of tasks can be automated. So the new study shows that the new study they did actually shows that this could be much higher. It could be about 80%. So, if you think that your job is safe because you're a mid-level manager or you're in administration, you're quite wrong. Actually, some of the jobs that are safest are physical jobs, because at the moment what AI programmers and computer science in general still struggles with is vision. How to create a good visual system, how to decode visual information, how to handle that information in ways that don't require too much data processing capacity. At the moment we don't have good ways to do that. So humans are actually quite good at simple tasks, and it's going to take some time until we get to the stage where we can replace, for example, construction workers. But the job of construction workers can become much narrower, so much fewer of them might be needed. Professions like, an administrator at a university, a hospital at a government office, a big company like data entry, those are probably going away quite soon. Also simple management jobs, simple supervisory jobs. Teaching and some jobs where you need more human skills, like medical jobs, training jobs, recruitment jobs, these might still be there for a longer time. At least that's how it looks at the moment. So, the problem with this is not only that people lose their jobs. You could think, all right, but the big companies are going to pay more in taxes, so that can be used to subsidize the people who have lost their jobs. Well, that depends on how your taxation system and your social safety network works. It could be done, but you would need to take away a lot of money from the companies. Do we do that now? No. Most developed countries are actually reducing taxes for the super rich, for people who own huge property, and for businesses. We are going in exactly the opposite direction, which the logic of technological and social change would recommend us to go. So we have to really engage with politics, and the ethical issue here is clear. What's happening right now is bad, and it's going to be letting it go on this way is wrong. So it's clear what the right thing to do would be, but it's also clear that it's not happening, even though people understand that that would be the right thing to do. In such cases, we have to go beyond academia and act. So we need to push the politicians to actually do what they're supposed to do and represent the population of countries, not just small subsets of the population. So, the questions we looked at were who the saving effect is good for. Is this good for society? It can be if it's done in the right way. And it's a very interesting thing. Like, how are we going to take care of the people who lose their jobs? Even if we force the companies to redistribute, or they voluntarily redistribute much of their money, the extra money that they're going to make with automatization to help the people that have lost their jobs, how do you retrain someone who's around 60? How do you retrain, say, someone who has been a mid-level manager to do a totally different kind of job to which they have no skills? How do you retrain an engineer to become a teacher? You can do it, but will they be good at that job? We might have to just bite the bullet and really say that we offer a good quality life to most of these people. And that's why many people say that even higher taxation won't do it. We need to change the current ownership structures around the technology which leads to such radical transformation in society. So, yeah. Two books which are very interesting on these topics, and I can recommend you both. One is Mana by Marshall Brain. He's very interested in these future different scenarios, and Mana is a very good short book. It's not really literature. What Marshall does in this book is mostly to go through two different ways in which society can use the job automatization, and it's roughly the two different ways that I have indicated here very briefly, but he's spelling them out in a lot more detail, in a very relatable way. So I can recommend everyone to read it. It's free, it's online on his website, and it can help you to think quite well about what to do about these issues. The other book is by Guy Standing. He's a professor at SOAS in London. He is one of the people who has been promoting the universal basic income schemes since a long time, and he is pointing out that already there are a lot of people forced into 0-hour contracts, on-demand work. These people don't have job security, or they're doing low-paid but highly skilled work for companies with data entry, data manipulation. Many secretaries today have to have higher skill sets than managers and leaders of organizations used to have 40, 50 years ago. These people are in more and more insecure and worse positions, and that's very dangerous for social stability. You don't want these people to get into a position where they feel that society is not doing enough for them anymore to play along with the rules. But that's where we seem to be pushing a lot of people in society, not just 5%, 10%, but maybe 50-60% of the working population in the next decades, not this year, but gradually. Just to close the video, here are a couple of recommendations of nice links you can check out. The Stanford Encyclopaedia of Philosophy has several good entries, the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy as well. You can start your reading there. And I've also included a couple of nice websites and good links to non-academic resources for those of you who don't have so much time or don't want to go into such detail. Actually, many internet-based newspapers have provided decent coverage of some of these issues recently. And if you want to see some of the more detailed regulation that has been proposed, the EU's ethics committees and the IEEE, which is a global organization, they're working on engineering and electronic engineering connected issues. They have proposed a lot of very sensible regulations and policies. We'll see whether any of it gets globally accepted and implemented by. We can be hopeful because they exist. At least some people care and are doing some work to do these things. Thank you so much, everyone, for your attention. I hope this has been interesting and useful for you. I would love to receive your feedback and let me know if you are interested in more similar videos or if you would like to hear more about any of these topics. I'm very happy to do more content on this and related issues as well, and I'm going to soon prepare the next chapter of this introduction to the ethics of AI lecture or talk or whatever it is. If you enjoy this kind of content, or you would like to hear me talk about other kinds of things, news, politics, philosophy, literature occasionally, then do subscribe, and you can support the channel in different ways. Look at my website. You can find the link below the video. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Have a lovely day and take care of yourselves, everyone. And with that, I'll say goodbye